Welcome to the Pinwheels pregame show. I am Mitchell Kaminski. Since we've last talked, a lot's happened. Pedro Grifol fired. Some of the staff fired. Grady Sizemore, the new interim manager. White Sox kind of laid out their qualifications, what they're looking for in their next manager. They also just pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the season this week for baseball standards. So let's get into it. QR code top of the screen there. That's for homage. You can scan that QR code. It'll take you right to the site. You can get yourself a shirt. They support the show. You should support them too. They got everything you're looking for. New episode of Hard Knocks came out last night. Get yourself a Bears shirt. Season's coming up. Caleb Williams looked pretty good. First preseason game. Or hey, if you're still like me, ride or die with the Sox, you can get yourself some Sox merch too and let the people know about it. All right, let's get into it. We were talking last week that it was only going to be, it wasn't a matter of if Pedro Grifol was going to get fired. It was when. Sure enough, right after we had that show, White Sox announced he is no longer the manager. They kind of made a surprising decision, though, because a lot of people just assumed that it was going to be the bench coach as far as Montoyo that would get promoted to that role. Charlie Montoyo did not get promoted to that role, despite the fact he is a former manager, helped lead some Blues Jays teams to the playoffs. He got canned, too, as the bench coach. So Grady Sizemore promoted to the manager. And this is a good feel-good story here. And interestingly enough, before we get into Grady, I don't know if this is true or not, but I did hear that one of the reasons that Montoyo, that is, didn't get that manager job is because he didn't want to do the media obligations. He did not want to have to speak to the media every day. That's kind of one of the things you have to do as a manager. So didn't get the job. He almost more or less did not want the job, was what I had heard. Don't know if that's how true or not that is, but I did find that interesting because he seemed like he would have been the leading candidate, especially because one of the reasons they fired Pedro is for lack of development of certain players. That's kind of what they're looking for, is just some growth and progress at this point in the season. Pedro obviously was not getting that done. They showed clear regression since he took over that role. So you would think they'd want someone with experience there, but it's kind of his right-hand man on the bench. I kind of like the move that Chris Getz made, cleaning house, promoting Grady Sizemore. Now, Grady Sizemore, obviously, I grew up watching him play. Notorious White Sox killer, although back in 2005, we do owe Grady because he helped kind of spark that run late in September, dropped a routine fly ball, and that kind of sparked the White Sox playoff run, helped them clinch that division. The rest is history. But he gets that job after last year. So 8 years after he had come out of the MLB, he decided he wanted to get into the coaching ranks. So last year, he took a job as an intern. And you've probably read it already. He was getting paid $15 an hour to be a coaching intern with the Arizona Diamondbacks. He was a coach down at the Arizona Complex League. And Josh Barfield, who was in the Diamondbacks organization at the time, he was running their player development program. He was the one that hired Sizemore. When Barfield got the job in Chicago, he kind of put in the good word for him. Hey, this Sizemore guy, I kind of liked him, but what he was doing in Arizona, White Sox hire him. His official designation, major league coach. Now they have all these shakeups. Not many people on the coaching staff survive. Ethan Katz is another notable one. We'll talk about it in a sec, but he gets promoted to the manager role. I do like this decision because the rest of the season, as we mentioned, it's all going to be about player development and growth. Pedro obviously he had a tough time reading the room and knowing what the right things to say. Like part of being a good leader is holding yourself accountable, admitting when you make mistakes, not just doubling down and adapting and learning on the fly. It didn't seem like he really knew how to do that because, this team needed accountability, which is tough to do when manager rarely held himself accountable. And it was kind of tough, even down to the bitter end. It seemed like there was times like he just didn't know like what the right things to say. Like he couldn't read the room. Like when he was kissing Jerry's ass on the way out, that's something like, what are you doing, man? Like, we all know you're going to get fired soon. This is just sad. This is a sad look on the way out, you flailing to try and save your job. And he just and so the players see that too, all this going on. So I can only imagine what it was like behind closed doors as he's trying to motivate this team. So now you have this is someone that a lot of these guys, especially these younger kids, probably grew up watching. Grady Sizemore. Very decorated resume. Multiple-time Gold Glove winner, 3-time All-Star. If it wasn't for injuries, those career numbers could have been a lot better. But you look up his baseball reference page, it's pretty impressive. And that's with all of those injuries. So I kind of like where Getz went. Hey, let's get a former player in there and help rally these guys early. And early on, the returns, quite frankly, they've been pretty positive. It looks like the players have responded. Now, he's only 4 games in, very, very small sample size. But we saw his first game as the interim manager. They fall down immediately 7-0 in a crosstown game, which would have been very easy to roll over. The manager just got fired. It just turned into Wrigley South, basically, because they got all these Cubs fans in here piling it on, yucking it up in the bleachers. But here comes Grady's boys. They rally from down 7. They cut that deficit to 7-6. They actually have a chance to win that game in the 9th inning. But then, story of the White Sox season, they can't hit with runners in scoring position. Actually, they can't really hit with runners out of scoring position. They can't really hit anytime, anywhere. So that wasn't surprising. They couldn't score him. They gave him a fighting chance. A couple days later, he picks up his first victory as a manager, beating the Yankees 12-2. This is a pretty massive upset, just from the fact that I want to talk about Kai Busch's performance a little bit as well. But I saw a stat from that game that the White Sox, and I'm going to make sure I get the right, make sure we're safe. This is from BR Betting. But apparently, the White Sox, in that game, that was one of the largest upsets since 2017. The Yankees were the first team since 2017 to be minus 350 or longer favorites and lose by 10 or more runs to the 29-91 White Sox. So that's a pretty good victory for the Sizemore's team. I think they've responded well. Actually, in these 4 games, despite being 1-3, they do have a +4 run differential right now, which, it's pretty good. They haven't lost a game by more than 3 runs. They've been in the fight all 4 of his early games as manager, which is encouraging to see. Now, I don't want to overreact to that yet, because the White Sox did lay out what they want as their next manager, and you kind of see this, like the early signs, and like, hey, you know what? This White Sox team, they're kind of fun to watch again. They're showing some effort that we thought we were going to get at the beginning of the season. You knew they weren't going to win many games, but they've been in all of these games. They've been competitive. Like when they were down against the Yankees the other night, 3-0, like usually like the old White Sox, I'm probably turn that off. This one, I was still like, okay, let's see if they can hang in there. Like you still felt like they were somewhat in the game. Now, we also made this mistake because I don't want to get too far in the weeds of being like, hey, Grady should be the next manager just because he's gotten off to a good start. That let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. People like him because he's not Pedro. Pedro is so bad that anyone you put in that position was gonna look better. And a lot of it, and actually Chris beat me to the point I was gonna make, it's Miguel Cairo all over again. People hated Tony. Anyone that was not Tony was going to be viewed as favorably. So when Miguel Cairo first got that job back in after Tony left for his health reasons, they started off really good. And it was like, hey, Miguel's got this team rallying around him. They look good again. A little bit of a shot in the arm. This guy should be the manager moving forward. Well, they finished the season only 2 games. I think they were 18-16 under his watch, only 2 games over 500. It was really about, it kind of leveled out. It was about what it was with Tony as the manager. But because he wasn't Tony, and everyone hated Tony, he was the guy that everyone was like, hey, yeah, this should be the. So I don't want to make that mistake again with Miguel or with Grady Sizemore. It's a couple guys games, sure. It's a long season. There's still over a month left. We still got all of September to get through. I got a tough schedule coming up. So let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. I like what the White Sox said. Now, they've lost the benefit of the doubt because they aren't a very good. I mean, we crap on them every week. It's obvious they're not like the most buttoned up organization. They did not do the most thorough of job searches when they hired Chris Getz. Obviously, the last time they hired a manager, Pedro Grifol, that turned out to be a disaster as well. So, spotty track record, they've kind of lost the benefit of the doubt. But I did like what Chris Getz had to say when they were talking about what they were looking for in their next manager. And this was something I was concerned about with Pedro Grifol, that he had been so bad. And the White Sox, the last time they had hired a manager with no ties to the organization. This is what we're talking about. They need fresh ideas, people outside the box from winning cultures, winning organizations who know how to implement that in Chicago with some experience. That's what they needed. In the past, White Sox always like, oh, no, we got to get someone with ties to the organization because that's what's comfortable. That's what's safe. Last time before Pedro, they'd hired someone from outside the organization, Charlie Manuel, back in 1998. So I was worried Pedro had done such a bad job. Jerry would be like, oh, see, yep, that's why I can't go out of the organization. Got to get someone from inside the family. So luckily, Chris Getz came out and said, no, we are looking for someone outside the organization, wearing a current uniform right now. Managerial experience would be preferred, not required. So that was encouraging to see. I'm glad they are taking that approach. I do hope they do keep an open mind with Grady, though, just because, and now I don't think They should immediately promote him just because it's been a good first couple of games, obviously. But it's going to be tough for the White Sox, even though you did get a jump on that job search. How many people are knocking down the doors to come take this White Sox job? It's not a very desirable job for established managers. Like Terry Francona, there were some rumblings. Oh, the White Sox going to get him to come out of retirement after his health issues. No, he's not coming out of. He's not going to manage this team. Absolutely not. And I think there's a lot of guys that like the good established managers. They're not going to be wanting to take this. Like you're going to take a team that's ready to win. This team's like far from it. So it's that's going to kind of whittle down your list of candidates. I think it's probably going to be someone that had that. If I had to bet, I would probably bet it's someone that's a first-time manager that's been on the staff of a team that's been winning or that's in a winning team in the past. Then probably going to give them the first opportunity. So that'll be interesting to see. But I don't want to fall into the Miguel Cairo trap again. I think let's be cautiously optimistic with Grady. Let's not overreact too early on just because he's not Pedro. Doesn't mean he's good. Now, I will say, though, like I do think he's connecting to these guys early. I do think he's giving them a bit of a shot in the arm. I'm very intrigued to see how they play the rest of the season. Because it's no secret. I'm not really looking at the win-loss record. It's more play of development. How do these guys play? Are they playing hard each day? And are some of the young guys that might be a core piece moving forward showing improvement and progress? Like Brooks Baldwin's been a guy. Yeah, the numbers don't jump off the page. He's only hitting like 211. But he's been a guy that looks like he's been showing some improvement. He's been steady in the field. He's come up with some big hits at times. That's been encouraging to see. Let's see some more of that the rest of the way. So yeah, and for Grady too, he's got to be managing every game. And I think he even came out and said this. He's got to be managing every game like it's the World Series because he's trying to turn some heads and get a job. That's very rare. The fact that it is kind of crazy. He is a feel good story for sure, which is why I'm rooting for the guy to be an intern getting paid $15 an hour and then 1 year later be managing a Major League Baseball team. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So we'll see. We got Chris Rocco in the chat. Brandon Hyde with Baltimore supposed to be the guy for a rebuild. I can see it. I actually heard they got the former Cardinals manager too. They were interested in. There's a list of potential candidates that were like floated around. I can see if I can pull that up, but I'm gonna give. It's interesting because Chris Getz is the general manager. I wanted to keep an open mind and give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think he did really well with the Dylan Cease trade. It's kind of his first big test. This trade deadline, not crazy about, but I mean, the jury's still out. We got to see how these guys perform, the prospects they got back. But on paper, it looked like we kind of underperformed there. So this manager hire is going to be it's going to be very telling as far as next steps is judging him as the GM. But with a new GM, you always do kind of want to pick your guy. I think they gave Pedro a fair shake. He gave him a chance. Like they gave him an opportunity to keep that job. But quite frankly, like if you were that bad at your job, like you probably wouldn't have stuck around as long as Pedro did. So I thought they were more than fair to the guy, let him stick around as long as they did, even after that. See, they even gave him a chance with the secret meeting with Jerry and gave him a couple more games. So, but this is gonna be very telling for Chris. Now he's gonna finally get his guy in there that they want, and we'll see. It should be very telling. Now let's take a look at something that also came out this week. The MLB Pipeline, they came out with their updated prospect rankings. And let's be honest, the White Sox kind of have to, it sucks. We already were duped by the first rebuild being invested and everyone bought in. Not many people buying in this time. I don't blame them. It's hard to get as excited about a lot of these guys. But it is kind of interesting looking at where this team was a year ago to where they are now. So I'm going to pull up. This is where they were top 15 prospects from last year, 2023, around this time last year. So we got Colson Montgomery, number one, Oscar Colas, who you haven't heard much from him nearly at all. Brian Ramos, we saw him a little bit this year. Old Jose Rodriguez at 6. He's no longer in the organization. Mena, he got traded to the Diamondbacks. Vera's out of the organization. Matthew Thompson, who was drafted by the Cubs. Yeah, White Sox picked him up, and then he's now back on the Cubs. So interesting journey for him. But a lot of guys no longer with the team, or they just haven't heard much from. So let's go. This is what the updated ones are, top 15. I will go through the top 30 of these. Noah Schultz, number 1. You're going to notice the common theme. A lot of these guys, pitchers, in that top 15. Montgomery, he slid down to 2. He's struggling a little bit in AAA. I would not be opposed with him finishing out the season in AAA. I do want to get a lot of these guys some time in the big leagues, but I think for Colson, I don't think it'd be the worst thing if he finished the season up in AAA. Just get him as many reps as he can. He had a couple injury issues last year. Hagen Smith, White Sox recent draft pick. He's up at number 3. Edgar Carroll, he's a guy I would not mind seeing a call up later in the year. He's been tearing the cover off the ball in AAA. He's looked really good. Corey Lee had the home run the other night, but we kind of talked about this last week. The offense hasn't been really where it needs to be. And for a team that's struggling to score runs, and even that Yankees game last night, like they had runners in scoring position in that 9th inning. They had a chance to tie that game. Just couldn't. There's not enough impact bats in that lineup. So he might be a nice spark. I would not mind seeing him called up. He's shown that he looks like he's ready. He was raking in Double-A, carrying that over to Triple-A. Iriarte, we got him from the Padres. He's all the way up at number 4. Wilco, young kid, draft from out of high school, didn't even play college ball. Big power hitter. I mean, we saw some good things from him from spring training. Brooks Baldwin, he's up in the majors doing his thing. Kai Busch, high wire act the other night. His first 2 starts, it's been very interesting with Kai Busch at number 10, left-hander. We picked him up last. This is a Rick Hahn pickup, Mr. Kai Busch. Got him from the Angels in that Giolito trade. I've actually, those first 2 starts, I've been pretty impressed because he clearly did not have his good stuff. I think the first start, he was very nervous. He walked a lot of guys. His next start against the Yankees, much better team, he had 7 walks. 7 walks. And he was able to navigate around all of those walks. And 4 2/3, and he only gave up 2 runs. And that's pretty impressive. Like that young, against that good of a lineup, being able to keep your composure and limit the damage like he did, I thought was very impressive. Now, he can't live like that all the time. He's got to start throwing more strikes. He only threw 27 strikes in that second start. So that's not going to fly. And usually you make that many mistakes, especially to a team that's got a Juan Soto and Aaron Judge in the lineup. You're not getting away with that too much moving forward. But the fact that he's only in his second major league start in a hitter-friendly ballpark, and he limited the damage like that, and he kept his composure on the mound, that was a very promising sign. I don't think his stuff is blowing anyone away, but his stuff plays in the big leagues for sure. Just started hitting that strike zone. He starts pounding that strike zone. I think they might have something there. So I like what I've seen from Kai Busch early on. Now, this is the interesting one to me, too. You go down to 13, or Jacob Gonzalez, I should say. He's a 12, shortstop, second baseman. Picked him up in the draft last year, first-round pick. Brian Ramos, 13th. And this just shows how much progress we've made. Look where he was last year. He was 3rd. Now, all the way down to 13th. So, farm system getting a little bit deeper. Back half of the top 30 here. The big one that's, Samuel Zavala, guy we got in that trade for Dylan Cease. Big interesting one for me here, Jake Eater, down at 23. That's one. It's now we've kind of gotten a year from the Jake Berger trade, and Berger got off to a slow start in Miami. Miami obviously sold a lot of the pieces, but he has 22 home runs this year. He's been hitting a lot of home runs. The White Sox, they need guys that can hit homers. Now with no Eloy, he would have been a nice DH to have in the farm system, especially because they rolled the dice on Eater, who was once considered a top pitching prospect in baseball. Injuries have really kind of hurt him. He just hasn't really found his footing yet with the White Sox. They're in AAA. So that's a little concerning to see. I hope it works out for him. But, man, it was a frowned upon trade at the time. Now it's also not looking great. Now, speaking of trades, White Sox, it's still pretty early from that trade deadline, but our own Craig Rollins, sportsmockery.com. If you are still following the White Sox, we do got a lot of good stuff on there with me, Craig, and Chi Sox fan Mike. There's been some good articles, so make sure you check that out. Craig had one today. I encourage you to read it, but I did think it was interesting. I kind of do a little brief overview, just kind of checking in on what some of the players the White Sox traded for at the deadline have been doing since they've come here. We'll start with Miguel Vargas. Miguel Vargas, he's been the biggest one. He was kind of the crown jewel, I guess, lack of a better word. He was the most valuable piece they brought in from all of these trades. He was part of that 3-team deal. He came from the Dodgers. He was known for his plate discipline. You might have seen him in that funny video that was circulating around social media where he was sitting in the dugout after a loss in Oakland, looking extremely depressed, thinking, what has happened in my life? I was just on the Dodgers. We were going to win the World Series. It was fun. And now I'm in this baseball hellscape. Even his former teammate, Tyler Glasnow, came out and was like, yeah, man, like I feel bad for him. Like winning cures everything. When you're in a losing team like that, it sucks because it kind of just drains you. Like winning covers a lot of problems. And he hasn't been hitting all that well with the Sox, but he has walked 7 times in his first 46 plate appearances, which doesn't sound crazy, but for White Sox standards, that's pretty good. And that was one of the things that was on his resume in the Dodgers organization. He showed good plate discipline. He's able to draw some walks. That's translated over here. So while the offensive numbers haven't been great, I have been encouraged by that. I'm hoping the bat's going to come around. He did hit a home run in Minnesota. One of the things that Pedro did that I didn't really like, he was playing him in the outfield. He can play in the outfield. He can really play all over, but he's more of an infielder. You got to I'd put him in the infield where he's a little bit more comfortable. Grady's been doing that so far. Hopefully they keep him doing that. When you're in a position where you're comfortable, usually it helps with the offense. We saw it with Yohan Moncada. Second base, kind of uncomfortable there. Moved to his more natural position. He, for one season, I should say, popped off. But the offensive numbers definitely spiked up. So Vargas, it hasn't been great, but it hasn't been terrible. Some of these other guys, though, that really stood out, Gerald Rosado, butchered it. He came over, Paul DeYoung trade. He was just only a little bit. He was kind of like, that was kind of a throwaway deal. Paul DeYoung, rental player, so you're not expecting to get much. Rosado, though, he was a reliever in the Royals system. He had some pretty good stuff, and he's been showing that reliever stuff so far. He has 6 strikeouts in 3 2/3 innings. He's looked pretty good so far in High A. He did have one rough outing, but since coming to the White Sox organization, he's been pretty good. So far too. Trey McGough, we got him from the Baltimore Orioles in that Eloy Jimenez trade. He's been pretty solid too. The other night, AAA Charlotte, threw 2 scoreless innings, didn't give up a hit, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. He's pitched 6 innings so far in AAA. He's only given up 1 hit in those 6 innings. He struck out 6 batters during that time frame. And he's looked pretty good. So you might see him in September at some point, late call up. So he's been good to watch. Other one that you might not have, he's kind of flown under the radar. We got him in the trade with the Phillies with Tanner Banks, kind of that late trade deadline deal. William Bergolla, and he's been really good too. Since that trade with the White Sox, he's hitting .367 with a .474 OBP in 10 games. He's got 5 RBIs. He's stolen 7 bases already. And he's got the same amount of walks as he does strikeouts. Pretty small sample size, but it's been encouraging to see what he's been able to do, especially for a guy like Tanner Banks. We'll see if any of these guys mount to anything. Vargas is going to be the one to really pay attention to going on, but some of these throwaway pieces, they've looked good early on in the minors. So that's encouraging. We'll be back with you. That's all we have for you this week. We'll be back next week, same time at noon. White Sox got one more against the Yankees tonight, and then I believe they head on the road for the first road game of Mr. Sizemore's career as a manager. They're going to head to Houston and then San Francisco. So that's a tough road trip. I'm sure there will be plenty to discuss once we get back there. A couple guys to keep watching. Kai Busch's next start, very intrigued by him. Jonathan Cannon, bit of a rough outing last night, but he's been encouraging too. And then Thorpe, I believe he got a little dinged up his last start, but it'll be interesting to see how he finishes out the season too. So looking for development from some of these guys. But baseball's been a little bit more fun to watch early on. Not going to fall into the Miguel Cairo trap like we did last year. Cautiously optimistic. At least the baseball is watchable again. Oh, one more thing I do want to talk about. Before we get to that, I do want to kind of talk about some of the nonsense that happened in the Crosstown series off the field. I can't believe we almost skipped over all of this. It was really funny because I saw Paul Konerko had the promo to try and get people hyped up for this Crosstown series. And he was talking about how, you never forget your, first Crosstown series moment, whether you're a player or a fan. It's all about, first, someone's going to experience their first Crosstown moment this time around. And I thought this weekend was the perfect snapshot of like what chaos those crosstown games are, because it's always a shit show as a fan. I used to love those rivalries, and now it's like not even worth going because it's a zoo at these games. I remember my first crosstown game. I was in second grade. We're in the upper deck 500 level, and we had a pair of state troopers behind us. They were off-duty state troopers at the time, but they were hammered. They had a great tailgate, and I got a beer spilled all over me by one of them in the fifth inning. Carlos Zambrano was pitching that game. He threw a temper tantrum after giving up a bunch of runs in the first inning, and he was yelling at Derek Lee, and they got pulled after that. Jake Peavy was pitching. That was my first. So I remember all that, and then I got a beer spilled on me too. But in the stands this weekend, we had a massive brawl on the concourse, which like don't know why no security stepped in, but it's just in the middle of the outfield concourse. People are swinging. But then we had a guy that tried to bring in a Jerry Sell the Team banner, and they got security all over him, like stink on a monkey, trying to rip the banner away from him. And props to this guy. He wouldn't give him the banner. He flew that thing. He held on to that thing, ball high and tight, good running back ball security. Guys trying to get it from him. Soon as the game's over, the guy, like the security, gave up. Guy had the banner still. He was taking photos with guys on the ramp all the way down. That was hilarious. And then we got two other idiots who jump onto the field. And the one guy, as he's trying to get away from security, hurts his foot. So they had to bring out the medical cart for him so they could get him off the field because he couldn't walk anymore. I thought that was a perfect encapsulation of what goes on at these crosstown games. Paul Konerko was right. You don't forget your first crosstown memory because stuff like this usually happens off the field, which is more entertaining than usually the product on the field, at least on the White Sox side, because it's always a shit show when you get a bunch of drunk Chicagoans together and these fake rivalries. I just thought that was hysterical, especially on the Fox broadcast. They're waiting for the delay. They got to get the stupid medical card out because two idiots decided to rush the field. Hey, more power to them. That right there. It's what the crosstown rivalry is all about. Spilling beers on people in the bleachers and fighting. Typical Chicago baseball behavior. That's all we have for you. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back. Pinwheel's pregame show, same time, noon, next Wednesday. Tonight at 8, believe regular Pinwheels and Ivy will be running. You can listen to Aldo, Fids. They'll talk about the Cubs, what's going on there. Do they think they have a shot at making the playoffs? They gave people some hope. Bullpen still sucks. We'll see. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your week.